Hola a todos. Welcome to, this is the first of many chalk and talk lessons. What is a chalk and talk lesson? Well, basically it's this. What I would like to do is that apart from the lessons that you're going to have with Cynthia and I, in which we are talking Spanish and English and covering stuff, I also want to do kind of a little bit more old-fashioned, what's called chalk and talk. Now, it's not very popular these days. In fact, it's frowned upon. If you're a chalk and talk teacher, what does it mean? That you write on the board and you explain things. But it is a system that's very valuable if it goes hand in hand with other things, okay? There's nothing wrong with chalk and talk, but obviously you don't want to be sitting listening to somebody doing that all the time. So there's a bit of everything that you need to learn. But one of the things that we're going to do is I'm going to kind of go into a bit more detail. Today I'm talking about the personal A, okay? La A personal. Why am I talking about that? Well, what I tend to do is I tend to get feedback from the people that I work with. Obviously, I have a lot of Skype students. And what I do is I tend to see where the issues are, where the confusions are, etc. And what I've seen just recently are a number of confusions about the personal A. So I'm going to do that. Now, you might be saying to yourself, where is your board to chalk on? Well, I'm going to try something slightly different. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the air around me because I can edit this afterwards. So I'm going to kind of put the words here for you, okay? Or maybe here. All right? So I'll be pointing and then I'm going to put them in. All right, let's see if that works. Why do I not want to use the board? I do love using a board. I love writing on the board and everything, but I write really badly. And so it's actually better if I write it on a keyboard and at least you'll be able to read it properly. Okay, personal A. What is it? What is it? Well, what's the problem with the personal A? The problem with the personal A is this, that we don't have any reference. We don't have a frame of reference in English for the personal A. So rather like the subjunctive, where we say, well, you know, we don't use it that much in English, so we don't really understand when we have to use it in Spanish. The same with the personal A. It doesn't translate. Most times, it doesn't translate into English. When we say, veo a Juan, right? In English, what we have is, I see Juan, okay? But in Spanish, we say, veo a Juan. I see two Juan. Okay, now that doesn't translate, so it doesn't naturally come to your mind that you have to put it in. So what you have to do is learn the rules of when you have to use it, okay? Because you won't hear it in English when we're doing these direct translations, which we do a lot at the beginning. You can't help but translate your sentences from English into Spanish. It's just the way that we have to do it. After a while, you start finding that, no, you don't need to translate your sentences because you're learning the melody and the music. But at the beginning, you do. Right, so how do we know when we have to use it? Well, the very first thing you need to understand is this. I want you to keep this concept in your mind as we go through. The concept is that the A stands for arrow, okay? Arrow. What I mean by that is that the A is the arrow that points at the person who is receiving the action, all right? So it's a pointer. It's showing you, in Spanish, who is receiving. Now, this is absolutely vital in Spanish. So understanding who is receiving the action in Spanish is very important. Why? Because in English, we must use the personal pronouns, the I, the you, the he, the she, him, her. In Spanish, you don't. And so sometimes you need to know who is doing what to whom. And we'll come back to that presently. All right, so the A is the arrow, pointing to the person who's receiving. So that's the first thing. Also, it's called the personal A, and it's kind of like a respectful little letter that we put in to show that what we're doing is we're dealing with a person or a pet with a human name, okay? So that's what the job is. It's kind of like a respectful little indication that this is an interaction with a person. And it's needed whenever there's an interaction between two people or more. Whenever there's an interaction, in my book, I think I would say virtually every time that there's an interaction, you need the personal A, unless it's replaced by something else, okay? Another preposition. But the personal A is interaction between two or more people, or a person and a pet, something like that, yeah? Okay. So when we use it, for example, I could say, conozco a Pedro, okay? I know Pedro. Why am I using the personal A? Because I'm showing that this is an interaction between Pedro and myself. Conozco a Pedro, okay? That's an interaction, I know him. Veo a Juan, I see Juan, okay? But if there's no interaction, then you don't need to use it. So let's look at when don't you have an interaction. For example, if you are telling somebody, giving somebody information about something. For example, I could say to you, tengo dos hermanas y un hermano. Tengo dos hermanos y un hermano. So I don't need to put in the personal A because I'm not having an interaction. I'm giving you some information. Yeah? So I'm giving you information about what I have. Tengo dos hermanas y un hermano. Okay? So with tener, when you are giving people information about the people that you have got in your life, you don't need the personal A. Also, when we use the word I, there is, there are, or any of the derivatives, hay, habría, habrá, ha habido, doesn't matter. You don't need the personal A. For example, I can say, there is a man in the street. And I'll say, hay un hombre en la calle. Okay? Hay un hombre. I don't have to say hay a un hombre. Hay un hombre en la calle. So these are non-interactive. I'm just telling you what I'm saying. Okay? Information. Tengo dos hermanos. Hay un hombre en la calle. So with those, you don't need to use the personal A. Also, it's called the personal A because it's personal. So really the idea is that you know the person that you're talking about, okay? It's a kind of, for example, conozco a Juan. I know Juan, okay? But sometimes you are referring to a person and you don't need to use a personal A. And it's when we're referring to a hypothetical person. Hypothetical, okay? So for example, you say, I need a good plumber. I need a good plumber. Or I'm looking for a good plumber. We don't know who this plumber is. We don't know the person. All we're doing is talking about a need. So we say, busco un fontanero bueno. Or busco un fontanero que sea bueno. Okay? Or necesito un buen fontanero. I need. So in none of those, neither have I used the personal A. Why? Because I don't know who this person is. It's a non-entity person at the moment. And so I won't use the personal A. Okay? But then I contract the plumber, and as all good plumbers are, he disappears for ages, and I'm looking for him. Now I know him. So I'm going to say, busco al fontanero. Busco a Pedro, el fontanero. ¿Dónde está? Okay? So busco a, I'm looking for him because I know him. Busco una secretaria de dirección. I'm looking for a PA, but I don't know who she is, so I'm not using the personal A. Does that make sense? Let me tell you what happened to me when I was on the immersion course in Salamanca. We were talking about the personal, I was writing an essay, and it was supposed to be a complex, complaining essay. Part of the LA, the DELE exam, you have to complain, okay? It's what you do every day of your life. As you learn Spanish, it's your whole time learning Spanish is complaining, of course. It's very useful. So, I was complaining and I said, este tipo de situación no es aceptable, using that man who teaches, what's his name that has got the really bad accent, he's dead now, Michel Thomas. No es aceptable, okay? So I put, este tipo de situación no es aceptable porque estoy perdiendo a mis clientes, okay? I'm losing my clients. And I put, estoy perdiendo a mis clientes. And the teacher said, ooh, why have you used the a? You shouldn't use the personal a. And I said, well, he said, you don't use the personal a if you're just talking about people you don't know. And I said, excuse me, I know all of my clients by name. And so he said, vale. And so he accepted it. He wasn't very happy about it, but so bear that in mind, that if you're just talking very generally about people that you don't know, maybe you don't need the personal a, okay? But I will tell you this, that if in doubt, use it, eh? Because here in Spain, certainly in Spain, I hear it used far more than not. And I hear it being used when perhaps you wouldn't need to use it. So don't worry about overusing. I think probably more of the concern would be underusing it. Right, so that brings me to this point about not knowing people. The bizarre thing is that there's an exception to this. Don't use the personal a if you don't know the person. Okay, and as always, there are always exceptions in Spanish. And I want just to make this point, bring this point home. Exceptions are the rule, okay, in Spanish. Why? Or in any language. Because if you do your degree in language, you will come out with a Bachelor of Arts, okay? Arts. And if you do a degree in physics, you'll come out with a Bachelor of Science. Language is art, it's not science, okay? So you'll be licenciado in Spanish. And if you did sciences, you'd be ingeniero, okay? So I am licenciado, I'm licensed to teach. Licensed to teach. Now, if you expect language to be science, you're going to be in for a big disappointment. It's art. It's fluid, it's flexible, it's flowing, and that's just the way it is. So there will always be exceptions. Expect the exceptions to be the rule, and then you won't be disappointed anymore. And there's no need to get angry about it, because I know people go, I can't believe it. This is terrible. Why? Why can't it just be straightforward? Well, try learning your own language as a foreigner and you'll understand that we have to shut half of our mouth when we complain about exceptions. English is filled with them. So, the exceptions are this, getting back to not knowing somebody. What I hear being used here is when people are talking, let's say we're expecting to see people in the street, yeah? Or we want to sneak out somewhere. You can say to somebody, ¿ves a alguien? Do you see somebody? ¿Ves a alguien? Or, mira, veo a alguien. I am seeing somebody. I see somebody. Veo a alguien. All right? And then, or the question, ¿ves a alguien? No. No veo a nadie. No veo a nadie. I am not seeing nobody. Okay? I don't see anybody. And we use the personal a. No veo a nadie. So, talk about that. We don't, the rule, don't use it if you don't know the people. No veo a nadie. So, I don't know if that's correct. Maybe the correct thing would be no veo a nadie, but that's not what I hear. I hear no veo a nadie. Okay? So be prepared to see these little exceptions every now and again. And also, let's come back to tener. So we said when you're giving people information, you don't use the personal a with tener. Tengo dos hermanos, tengo una casa. Well, no, you wouldn't use that anyway. Okay, tengo un perro. But then you may have noticed this, and one of our members, Mike, flagged this up to me. And what it is, it's when we use tener with the personal a. When do you do that? You say things like this. We do in English. Oh, I've got my mother-in-law in the hospital at the moment. I've got my mother-in-law in the hospital. Mm-hmm. How you say that in Spanish is you say, tengo a mi suegra en el hospital, como ingresada. Tengo a mi suegra, okay? Or we say something like this, oh, I've got my daughter in the house, depressed. Tengo a mi hija deprimida en casa. Tengo a mi hija deprimida en casa. And so with tener, we can use the personal A. When? 2 times. From what I can work out, I've been thinking about it for a long time. We use tener when we are referring to location of somebody, having somebody in a location, and also somebody being in a state, like of depression, happiness, sadness, illness. You could say, yeah, the boss is organising a meeting online, and he can say, vale, estamos todos aquí y también yo tengo a mi jefe en Marruecos, ¿vale? Tengo a mi jefe esperándonos allí en Marruecos. So I've got my boss waiting for us. So we're talking about location. Where is he? And he's got him there. Okay? Or, for example, we could say, joder, tengo a mi marido muy preocupado por el tema de dinero. Okay? So I've got my husband really worried about money problems. So in a state, he's in the state. So if you're talking about having somebody in a location or having somebody in a state, we use the personal A. And we do in English, don't we? We have a I don't know if it's used throughout the English-speaking world, but certainly in the UK, it's very common to say, I've got my mother-in-law with me this week at home. Tengo a mi suegra aquí con nosotros en casa esta semana. So that's when you're going to use the personal A with tener, location or state. And with animals, yeah. Tengo a mi perro abajo. I have got my dog downstairs. Tell you where he is. Tengo a mi perro, because he's my dog, and we're using location. Tengo a mi perro abajo. Does that make sense? So, let's just review this, and I'm going to finish off with a little bit of extra thing about the arrow. So we've got any interaction between people or between a person and animals, you'll find that you'll have the personal A there. Okay? Then, the exceptions to that are when you're giving information with a tener, tengo un hermano, and with an hay 3 personas en la calle. Okay, so no personal A there. Then, with tener, if you're talking about having somebody in a location or having somebody in a state, you can use it. Tengo a mi amigo este fin de semana. I've got my friend with me this weekend. O tengo a mi madre muy enferma. I've got my mum ill. Okay, so that's the exception to tener. And then we've got the looking for somebody hypothetically that we don't know. Busco un carpintero. Necesito un electricista. So these people, you don't know who they are, so you won't use the personal A. So that's that. Yeah. Now, the other reason for the personal A is like without it, Spanish would be very, 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 what's the word? Confusing. Right. Think about this sentence. All right. If I say, okay, Pedro le envía un regalo a María. Okay? So, Pedro le envía un regalo a María. Pedro sends a present to María. Now, can you see that we've got a María? So if you took that a and you replaced it and made it into an arrow, what you would see is that Pedro is the doer, sending, and the present is going to Maria. Okay, so that's what's happening. So Pedro le envía un regalo a María. Okay? Now, if I take the A from this side and I plop it onto this side, it would become a Pedro le envía un regalo María. And suddenly, the whole thing would be the other way around. And it would be that María was sending a present to Pedro. So the a is always showing, it's always pointing to the person who's receiving. And in Spanish, you can flip them around. It doesn't matter. You can put the a, Pedro, María, or you can put Pedro a María. Your choice. So imagine if the personal A didn't exist. Then there would be problems. There would be confusion. Total. Okay? So, watch out for that. That you can put stuff where you like, but remember that the person who's receiving the action must have the a. Now, one of the last things that we're going to talk about is that the a sometimes catches us out because we think it's a personal a and it isn't, it's a preposition. Right? So when I say, a mí me gusta el helado, the a is not the personal a, it's a preposition. Okay, that's the real a to. So that is, ice cream is pleasing to me. Yeah? And the to me is doubled up. It's a mí and me. Yeah? So be careful with that. It's important to understand that a can also be a preposition. All right? So the personal a comes when there's an interaction between two people. Pedro le envía un regalo a María. Yeah? But when you say a mí, that's a preposition. All right? That's to me. Okay? That's why we use me, because after prepositions you have to put me or ti. Okay? Which is another lesson. Okay, so there we have the personal A. It's used massively. Without it, it's very rare that you can actually speak 4 or 5 sentences without using the personal A. It's very difficult, unless you're just chatting about like very boring stuff. But whenever you mention any interaction, the personal A is there. All right, so be aware of that. And watch out when you're reading your materials, when you're listening to Cynthia and I talk, watch out for it. See if you can identify in the next lesson how many times we use the personal a and where and what triggers it off. What kind of interaction are you seeing? And maybe look for the times when we don't use it and you expected it. Why are we not using it there? Okay? So, that's it. The personal A. Very important. You must use it. You must understand it. So I hope that helps a little bit. And let's see how now I can begin to put these things floating around me. Okay. Hasta luego, chicos.